G'day everyone, Rune here, and this is the second chapter of my series, What If Naruto Was a Girl? In the last chapter, we went over the new backstories for Naruto, now called Naruko, Sakura, Ino, and Hinata, all the way up to the confrontation with Mizuki. To quickly recap, in this timeline, Ino and Sakura had decided to befriend the lonely Naruko, and the three of them became best friends. Naruko also befriends Hinata, though it's not as close a bond as she has with Sakura and Ino, who basically view her as a little sister. This all falls apart, however, when Sakura and Ino have their falling out of their shared crush on Sasuke, completely unaware that Naruko has her own crush on him, which only compounds her belief that if she were ever to act on those feelings, she would lose her friends. Naruko also develops a resentment of Sasuke because of the falling out, even though she knows deep down that it wasn't his fault. It gets to the point where Naruko believes that if she doesn't pass the final exam, they won't want anything to do with her, making it easy for Mizuki to manipulate her into stealing the scroll. After overhearing what was going on, Sakura and Ino went after their friend, getting caught up in the confrontation with Mizuki and finding out the truth about the Nine Tails. However, they do not buy the idea that Naruko is the fox and stand to defend her. Naruko, driven by her desire to protect her friends, uses the Shadow Clone Jutsu to create an army to fight Mizuki. And this is where the next chapter begins. After beating down on Mizuki, Naruko turns to Iruka, Sakura, and Ino, apologizing for getting them wrapped up in this mess. She just really wanted to pass. Now without the immediate threat, Sakura and Ino are finally able to confront their friend about why she'd been so desperate to graduate and if it had anything to do with why she'd been acting off lately. Finally, the girls are able to have a heart-to-heart and Sakura and Ino finally realize that they were being pretty dumb. Not only had they let a crush end their friendship when really it should have given them more to talk about and relate to, they'd let their stupid feud hurt their friend. A friend that they practically saw as a sister. Holding on tight to Naruko, Sakura and Ino apologize for not being there for her, and for making her think that they wouldn't want to be her friends anymore if she didn't graduate from the academy. With the girls now reconciled, Iruka gets their attention, saying that he has a present to give to Naruko for her bravery in not only facing down Mizuki, but also facing her personal fears. He congratulates her on her graduation and presents her with her very own headband. Smiling with tears in their eyes, the three girls celebrate. The next day, Naruko has a registration done. However, it's not that dumb white and red face paint thing. It's actually a nice picture. She also meets Konohamaru, who she gives a light bop on the head for being a disturbance, before then proceeding to lecture him about how a surprise attack isn't a surprise if you announce it. She is basically channeling all of the times Sakura, Ino, or Iruka gave her lectures. After that, while Naruko is spending time with Ino and Sakura, Konohamaru all but demands to be Naruko's student. To this, she says that she's only just graduated the academy, but she's willing to show him a few tricks if he's willing to be polite and address her by name. Now, something I should clear up is that the Ninja Centerfold, or Sexy Jutsu, does not exist in this timeline. So Naruko would instead be teaching him a new jutsu unique to Naruko, which I'm calling Kitten Me. It's a transformation jutsu which allows Naruko to turn herself into a kitten. Yes, she did get the idea from her nickname. All the while, Sakura and Ino are there watching their friend trying to teach this kid. When Ebisu shows up and starts bad-mouthing Naruko, instead of Naruko being the one to shut him up, it's Sakura and Ino, who, through their combined big sister's mad glare, managed to scare Ebisu into apologizing to Naruko. It also startles him as he'd never expected her to have such loyal friends. After this, Naruko gives Konohamaru the speech about the road to being Hokage not having any shortcuts, and the boy declares that he will beat Naruko and become the Hokage. The next day, Naruko, Sakura, and Ino all sit at the same table, waiting to be told their new Genin teams. While they wait, they are approached by another student who asks why Naruko is there and why Sakura and Ino are talking to her. To which the girls reply that Naruko had graduated the academy the other day, and that she's sitting with them because she's their friend. Just as the class is about to bombard the girls with questions, Sasuke walks over and tells the girls to move over as there's nowhere else for him to sit. Sakura and Ino, knowing that they'd probably get into a fight if he sat next to one of them, instead maneuver it so that he's sitting next to Naruto, who they give an apologetic look. When the teams are read out, Sakura and Naruto are stunned to find that they're on the same team as Sasuke. Looking over to Ino nervously, the pale blonde girl simply sighs before smiling at Sakura and telling her to take care of Naruto. To which Sakura grins. Who do you take me for? It's pretty obvious she wouldn't do it herself. Hey! While they're waiting for their new teacher to arrive, Sakura notices that Naruto is getting rather antsy. While Naruto isn't as impulsive as the cat in Naruto, she is still willing to pay pranks if she thinks the person deserves it. Plus, she's getting really bored. Sakura is able to recognize this and so concocts a scheme to keep her entertained, or at least still. Pulling out a hairbrush and a few hair ties, she asks Naruto to let her style her hair, giving the blonde puppy eyes. Naruto easily caves and agrees, but on the condition that her hairstyle needs to be practical, since they don't know if they're going to need to do any sparring when their teacher finally shows up. Sakura agrees and decides to put Naruto's hair into a romantic tuck. While she's working, she fills the silence with random comments and observations about Naruto's hair, like how she needs to get it trimmed. Eventually, Kakashi arrives just as Sakura is finishing off the hairstyle, and he has to say that his first impressions of them are that they're kind of boring. He then calls everyone to the roof, where we have everyone's list of likes, dislikes, and dreams. And while Sasuke's is the same, Naruto and Sakura's reactions are very different. Sakura worries that the person he's sworn to kill is Naruto, as she knows that they haven't gotten along in the past, while Naruto is worried what that person could have done to make Sasuke hate them so much. For Sakura, she says that one of her favourite things is her precious little sister Naruto, while she tackles the blonde in a hug. As for her dream, she thinks about it for a moment before saying that she hasn't made up her mind yet. Then for her dislikes, she glances at Naruto out of the corner of her eye, her hugs tightening ever so slightly, before saying that there's nothing in the world that she hates more than those that hate and hurt others for no good reason. For Naruto, she says that her favourite things are spending time with her friends Sakura and Ino, and when they can eat ramen together. She dislikes days when she can't spend any time with her friends, and her dream is to be the greatest Hokage in history. After the introductions are done, Kakashi is seriously reconsidering his stance on the three being boring. Sasuke has that whole I want to kill someone thing going, while Sakura has a very strong protective instinct over Naruto, and Naruto herself is very interesting, what with that dream of hers. He then tells the three to meet him tomorrow for their real test and instructs them to not have breakfast. The next day, after Kakashi arrives late and Sakura again had to distract Naruto by putting her hair up in the same style as before, he explains the bell test. This time, Naruto doesn't try to attack Kakashi before he starts the test, and instead carefully listens to the instructions and eyes the bells carefully. When Kakashi tells them to start, Sakura and Sasuke dash off while Naruto remains behind. While Kakashi reads his copy of Make Out Practice, Naruto starts to come at him slowly from many different angles, trying to test out if the shinobi has any holes in his guard. While this is happening, Sakura feels a tap on her shoulder and almost screams before a hand slaps over her mouth, keeping her quiet. Looking behind her, she comes face to face with Naruto, who is holding a figure to her lips. Do you know where Sasuke is? Sakura shakes her head before pointing at the Naruto still testing Kakashi. Naruto explains that it's just one of her shadow clones, to keep Kakashi distracted while she found her and Sasuke. With that said, the two race off to find the Uchiha. Once they do, Naruto tells them that they need to work together if they're going to stand a chance. Sakura shoots this down immediately, while Sakura asks Naruto what she's thinking, genuinely curious as to what made her come to this conclusion. Naruto explains that she doesn't want any of them to fail when all of them had worked so hard to make it this far. Also, it wasn't simply a matter of one person failing. The regulations stated that each Genin team had to have 3 Genin, so if one of them failed this test, they all did. Sakura is really surprised. She'd completely forgotten that part of the ninja rulebook, so for Naruto to remember it made her feel really proud of her friend. His attention now gained, Sasuke asks if Naruto has a plan, to which she smiles. Back with Kakashi, he had finally gotten bored enough with the clone to throw an actual punch, making the clone poof and making Kakashi somewhat impressed that Naruto had managed to pull the switcheroo on him. However, time is ticking down and he's starting to wonder what's taking the team so long. Just as he's about to go looking for them, Naruto and Sasuke come charging out of the trees, rushing him. And with their combined effort, he does end up needing to put his book away. At the edge of the trees, he spots Sakura cheering the two of them on. This makes Kakashi roll his eyes, coming to the conclusion that their plan was simply to have Naruto and Sasuke double team him to get the bells. However, he soon hears a loud shout of "Charge!" as a swarm of Naruto and Sasuke clones launch out of the trees and begin to dogpile him. Somehow, Naruto had managed to teach Sasuke the Shadow Clone in the time before their attack. This is actually getting a bit tricky. He manages to dispel most of the clones, however, Naruto and Sasuke each get a punch on each of his cheeks, making Kakashi grab their hands and prepare to throw them. However, before he can, a little furry form leaps up and snatches the bells from his waist. Eye widening, Kakashi sees a little pink kitten holding the bells in its mouth. Throwing Naruto and Sasuke aside, he prepares to go after the cat, only for it to turn into Sakura in a puff of smoke. "Naruto! Sasuke! Now!" Jumping over Kakashi in his shock, Naruto and Sasuke get in front of him, just in time to catch the bell that Sakura had thrown at them together. Big smiles on Naruto and Sakura's faces, and a small smirk on Sasuke's, the three turn to Kakashi. "There! All three of us nabbed a bell. You can't fail any of us." Kakashi chuckles at the way Naruto had said that. It was like she was challenging him to say no, to say that they did fail despite having a solid argument. He says that they all passed and congratulates Naruto on being able to teach Sakura and Sasuke the clone jutsu and that cat transformation in the time they had. Only to be told that Naruto hadn't taught them. Sakura already knew the kitten me due to them being childhood friends and helping Naruto create it. As for the clones, they were all Naruto's. She just had them transform into her teammates in order to trick Kakashi into thinking that Sasuke had the jutsu and Sakura was somewhere she wasn't. That way his attention would be all on her and Sasuke, allowing Sakura to sneak through his defenses in her cat form. Giving a small laugh, Kakashi invites the three to have lunch at a restaurant to celebrate. And that, everyone, is where I'm going to end the story for now. Join me here next time as we get into the Land of Waves arc. I'm Rune. See you next chapter.